Psalm 111. Praise the Lord. I will praise the Lord with all my heart in the assembly of the upright and in the congregation. The works of the Lord are great, studied by all who have pleasure in them. His work is honourable and glorious, and his righteousness endures forever. He has made his wonderful works to be remembered. The Lord is gracious and full of compassion. He has given food to those who fear him. He will be ever mindful of his covenant. He has declared to his people the power of his works in giving them the heritage of the nations. The works of his hands are verity and justice. All his precepts are sure. They stand fast forever and ever, and are done in truth and uprightness. He has sent his redemption to his people. He has commanded his covenant forever. Holy and awesome is his name. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. A good understanding have all those who do his commandments. His praises endure forever.
And the sharing this morning is called Abigail, a woman of wisdom and courage. Now, I didn't really know a lot about Abigail, but I stumbled across some notes that I'd obviously found or written from somewhere, and I thought, I think we'll look into that, because I didn't know what I was going to share, and so I got into the story of Abigail and David. It's a wonderful story, and we will be chunks, but the Bible reading is 1 Samuel 25, 1 to 35. But see, 35 verses is too long to read in one go, so that's why we're breaking it up. So let's get some background on that reading. Now, first of all, think about it, and this is me included probably in a very big way, but all of us react when we're angry. We don't respond with wisdom and sense. Or when we are in a rage, we can sometimes do crazy things, say crazy things. So we're going to be looking at a moment in David's life when he was driven by anger. Now, it can happen to any of us, we all know, and me, obviously. Something happens, somebody says or does something that we don't agree with, and it's all on, so to speak. So Les is going to come up now, please, and he's going to read 1 Samuel 1, verses 1 to 11. 1 to 13.
Now, this is a different translation to perhaps what you're expecting. This is from the Message, and this is in tune with what Marion is speaking about this morning. Samuel 25. Samuel died. The whole country came to his funeral. Everyone grieved over his death, and he was buried in his hometown of Ramah. Meanwhile, David moved again, this time to the wilderness of Maon. There was a certain man in Maon who carried on his business in the region of Carmel. He was very prosperous, 3,000 sheep, 1,000 goats, and it was sheep shearing time in Carmel. The man's name was Nabal, which means fool, a Calebite, and his wife's name was Abigail. The woman was intelligent and good-looking, the man brutish and mean. David, out in the back country, heard that Nabal was shearing his sheep and sent 10 of his young men off with these instructions. Go to Carmel and approach Nabal and greet him in my name. Peace, life and peace to you, peace to your household, peace to everyone here. I heard that it's sheep shearing time. Now here's the point. When your shepherds were camped near us, we didn't take advantage of them. They didn't lose a thing all the time they were with us in Carmel. Ask your young men, they'll tell you. What I'm asking is that you be generous with my men. Share the feast. Give whatever your heart tells you to your servants and to me, David, your son. David's young men went and delivered his message word for word to Nabal. Nabal tore into them. Who is this David? Who is this son of Jesse? The country is full of runaway servants these days. Do you think I'm going to take good bread and wine and meat freshly butchered for my sheep shearers and give it to men I've never laid eyes on? Who knows where they've come from?
That's the scene for the story, hasn't it? So, thank you, Liz. David was in need of food for himself and for his men, so he sought out the help of a very rich man named Nabal, who stayed nearby and owned the large flock. Now, as you'll have noticed from the reading, the name Nabal means fool in Hebrew. Now, he was a descendant of Caleb, as in our favourite, Caleb and Joshua, the two spies who went into the promised land. Two of the spies. Nabal was unlike his ancestor in many ways. He was foolish, but Caleb was wise. Nabal did not take God into account, but Caleb counted on God's promises. Nabal opposed God's purposes and died prematurely, but Caleb cooperated with God and lived long. Now, this was not an unreasonable request that David made of Nabal, because Nabal's flock had been receiving David's protection from bandits and robbers. And so his presence nearby had actually been a blessing to this other guy. And moreover, it was sheep shearing time, and it was customary in those days for the rich to bless the needy by providing feasts, looking after the shearers, etc. But David's request was harshly and rudely turned down. Now, this angered David, and he reacted with vengeance. He took arms and brought 400 of his men to fight Nabal to get what he wanted. David overreacted to Nabal's insulting rebuff. He was prepared to attack and kill every male in Nabal's household that very night. Now, we all know that nothing good is going to come out of behaviour like that. But what about us? Think about it. The best thing David could have done was take time out, not to say anything or do anything until the rage was over. But do we do that? I'm going to read Romans 12:17 to 19. Recompense to no man evil for evil. Provide things honest in the sight of all men. If it be possible, as much as lieth in you, live peaceably with all men. Dearly beloved, avenge not yourselves, but rather give place unto wrath. For it is written, vengeance is mine, I will repay, says the Lord. Therefore, if thine enemy is hungry, feed him. If he thirsts, give him a drink. For in doing so, you shall heap coals of fire on his head. Be not overcome by evil, but overcome evil with good. What we are to do is to do what is right. And this does not include taking revenge or behaving violently, and that's physically or verbally. Our number one concern is not justice, or this is probably one of my lines, it's the principle of the matter. I'd say, it's the principle of the matter. But that's not what it's about. It's to show love and kindness, to extend mercy and grace, and to seek unity and peace. Now, Lisa's coming back, and he's going to read 1 Samuel 25, 14 to 19.
As she was riding her donkey, descending into a ravine, David and his men were descending from the other end. So they met there on the road. Now David had just said that sure was a waste guarding everything this man had out in the wild, so that nothing he had was lost. And now he rewards me with insults, a real slap in the face. May God do his worst to me if Nabal and every male in his misgotten brood isn't dead meat by morning. As soon as Abigail saw David, she got off her donkey and fell on her knees at his feet, her face to the ground in homage, saying, "My master, let me take the blame. Let me speak to you. Listen to what I have to say. Don't dwell on what that brute Nabal did. He acts out the meaning of his name, Nabal, fool. Foolishness oozes from him. I wasn't there when the young men and my master sent arrived. I didn't see them. And now, my master, as God lives and as you live, God has kept you from this avenging murder. And may your enemies, all who seek my master's harm, end up like Nabal. Now, take this gift that I, your servant girl, have brought to my master, and give it to the young men who follow in the steps of my master. Forgive my presumption, but God is at work in my master, developing a rule solid and dependable. My master fights God's battles. As long as you live, no evil will stick to you. If anyone stands in your way, if anyone tries to get you out of the way, know this: your God-honoured life is tightly bound in the bundle of God-protected life. But the lives of your enemies will be hurled aside as a stone is thrown from a sling. When God completes all the goodness he has promised my master and sets you up as prince over Israel, my master will not have this dead weight in his heart, the guilt of an avenging murder. And when God has worked things for good for my master, remember me."
So, Abigail was informed by her servant of what was about to take place. And did you notice that the message worded it, Abigail flew into action, that's verse 18. In other words, she made haste. She was a woman who seized the situation and came up with a plan. She pulled together an impressive array of goods for David and his men, the best she could offer at short notice. She was offering a gift to turn away wrath. She was driven by a desire for peace. It wasn't about what was right and what was wrong. In Romans 12:8 says, and 18, the one I just read, "If it is possible, as far as it depends on you, live at peace with everyone." Abigail was not trying to defend Nabal's actions, Because we'd already read in verse 3, he was churlish and evil in his doings. He was not a nice man. Even his servant testified that Nabal was a wicked man who listens to no one. That was verse 17. And Nabal's servant appealed to Abigail to reverse Nabal's orders. He testified that God had blessed Nabal's shepherds greatly through David. David's soldiers had been a wall of protection for them. Now, and the thing was, I looked up, because you get Bible commentaries, and I learned something. When shepherds went out in the field with their sheep, they had 2 bags slung over their shoulders. One was for their food for the day, and the other one was for stones, so they could just throw a stone at some animal, or, as in David's life, Goliath. And funnily enough, Warwick was watching a movie last night. It was a really, really old movie, but it was about David and Goliath. And I saw it, and there was this little kid there, and he was a shepherd, but he had 2 bags on his shoulder. I thought, gee, well, the filmmaker got that right. An interesting little fact. Okay, so getting back to David's soldiers had been a wall of protection for Nabal, and one of the characteristics of a fool is that he or she does not listen to other people. Nabal was such a fool, he didn't even listen to God. Now, the Hebrew words for good and fool each occur 7 times in chapter 25. So together they represent the major themes of the story. And later, when Abigail spoke to David, she herself said, Nabal is a wicked man, verse 25. She was not trying to defend Nabal, but did you notice a small phrase in that reading? But she said nothing to her husband Nabal. Now, was it proper for her to do this? She went out, she got all this food ready to take to David, but she didn't tell Nabal. Well, when you think about it, it was because she was attempting to save his life, Nabal's life. If she'd told him what she was going to do, he would not have been pleased, you can imagine it. And he probably would have not have permitted her to go, so he would have died at David's hand as a result, because David was all fired up. He was all for the battle. He was in. She was seeking peace, not justice. She's a peacemaker. We need to be peacemakers. Matthew 5:19. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they will be called children of God. Now, is there a guarantee of success when you try to be a peacemaker? No, there isn't. But we have to try. So let's just look at what a peacemaker is or does. A peacemaker is a person who helps others solve a conflict and reach a peaceful solution. So what are the traits of a peacemaker? Well, they're peaceable people, open to reason. They're impartial and sincere. They're willing to be patient, and they're willing to go the extra mile. Abigail did what she could to be such a person. She showed confidence in God. And now Lisa's going to read 1 Samuel 25:20 to 31. The message doesn't have verses, like the verse numbers. It's quite tricky, actually, isn't it, Liz?
Okay. And David said, Blessed be God, the God of Israel. He sent you to meet me, and blessed be your good sense. Bless you for keeping me from murder and taking charge of looking out for me. A close call. As God lives, the God of Israel, who kept me from hurting you, if you had not come as quickly as you did, stopping me in my tracks, by morning there would have been nothing left of Nabal but dead meat." Then David accepted the gift she brought him and said, "Return home in peace. I've heard what you've said, and I'll do what you've asked."
Abigail showed her respect for David. She honoured him, and she reminded him of God's help in his life and God's plan for his life, because David knew that he was the future king. Committing such needless bloodshed would have been a big mistake. So such wisdom Abigail had. David was about to attack fellow Judanians and wipe out a whole family. Now this act would have undone all his relationships with his fellow Israelites. And remember, he was a future king, so wasn't looking good. Her words disarmed David and quenched the rage. Abigail's approach to David was a model of tact and courage. Now you just got to visualise this woman. She's riding a donkey. She did have servants with her because they're carrying, they've got donkeys, they're carrying the food and stuff. She's approaching 400 armed men who were riding horses, and they were bent on slaughtering her household. It took immense courage and boldness, as well as great wisdom, for Abigail to take her own life in her own hands and do what she did. First, she took the blame for her husband's foolish actions. She begged David to listen to her. Her own husband would not. Nabal had proudly described David as just a runaway servant. But Abigail presented herself humbly as a servant to David. She proceeded to help David view his situation from God's perspective. She referred to the Lord as the one who, in response to her words, was restraining him from shedding innocent blood. Verse 26. She presented her gift of food and asked David's forgiveness, again as a substitute for her husband. This is a really cool bit. Have you heard the phrase, heap burning coals on his head? I remember hearing that years ago and thinking, what does that mean? I mean, who's going to heap burning coals on your head? Who'd want them on your head? How could that be a blessing to anyone? Proverbs 25, 21 to 22 says, just like we read in Romans, if your enemy is hungry, give him food to eat. If he's thirsty, give him water to drink. In doing this, you will heap burning coals on his head, and the Lord will reward you. In those times, people kept warm and did their cooking with burning coals. And I smiled and thought, well, some of us still do. When you ran out of coal, you had to borrow from your neighbours. So if the coal runs out and your enemies come for it, don't turn them away, or give them just a few. Be generous. Give them a heap so that they have to carry it over their heads, because that's how they carried stuff in the Middle East. And don't just give coals, give them burning ones in a pan so they can go back and use them immediately to bake their bread. Doesn't that make sense now? One Bible commentary said, giving a person coals in a pan to carry home on his head was a neighbourly, kind act. It made friends, not enemies. And that's what Abigail did. She gave them ample supply of food. She showed them respect and kindness. She spoke with wisdom and grace. So what can we learn from Abigail? Her lesson for us is to speak to build others up. Nabal spoke to tear David down. Abigail speaks to build him up. She said, God is going to do a great thing in your life and you will be the future king. We need to remember that, to build others up. Ephesians 4:29, do not let any unwholesome talk come out of your mouths, but only what is helpful for building others up according to their needs, that it might benefit those who listen. It's all about the listeners. We speak only what is helpful to build others up according to their needs, because they benefit from our words. That's the goal. We speak to edify and bless, build up and encourage. In other words, if our words can't benefit or bless someone, we have to think twice. Abigail's words changed history. A massacre was avoided and lives were saved. Proverbs 15:1, a gentle answer turns away wrath, but a harsh word, and that was Nabal's, stirs up anger. James says in James 5:3-8, if we use our tongues unwisely, we can burn down a forest and cause great destruction. So we have to use our tongues with godly wisdom and we'll save lives. No wonder the writer started off this passage telling us that Abigail was intelligent and beautiful. She was, and I believe that beautiful doesn't just refer to her looks. It was her character. She was wise and humble, quick thinking and resourceful, diligent and persuasive, sensible, capable, and not impulsive. David was saved from the potential agony of committing a foolish act because someone cared enough to speak up. We do not need a title to play a significant role. We don't need a position or status to have an influence on people's lives. Wealth and status don't make us. Kindness and grace does. We are most like Christ when we show these qualities. And the last reading is 32-35. Shall I? I'll just read it again. And David said, blessed be God, the God of Israel. He sent you to meet me. Blessed be your good sense. Bless you for keeping me from murder and taking charge of looking out for me. A close call. As God lives, the God of Israel, who kept me from hurting you. But if you had not come as quickly as you did, stopping me in my tracks, by morning there would have been nothing left of Nabal, but dead meat. Pretty graphic, eh? Then David accepted the gift she brought and said, return in peace. I've heard what you said, and I'll do what you asked.